you could be forgiven for thinking that Republican House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy adores Donald Trump. I mean, he once got an aide to sift through a jar of Starburst and remove flavors Trump didn't like. He was one of Trump's earliest supporters when he announced his run for president, and he's gone to mortifying lengths to appease Trump's most outspoken supporters in Congress today. Trump loved him right back, referring to him as my Kevin. But what does the top House Republican really think about Donald J. Trump? Well, in June 2016, the day after news broke of a Russian hack on the DNC, McCarthy remarked to fellow GOP leaders that he believes Vladimir Putin pays Donald Trump. When some in the room laughed, McCarthy added, "Swear to God." The Washington Post obtained audio of that meeting. A spokesman for McCarthy said at the time the remark was a joke. That's the McCarthy approach to Donald Trump. Critical behind closed doors, fawning in Trump's presence, or on Fox News. We saw it again during the January 6th insurrection. As the riot went on, McCarthy was furious at Trump, telling him to call supporters off in an expletive-filled phone call. But what happened just hours later? Once it was safe for Congress to return to work, some Republicans backed away from Trump's election lies, including Kelly Loeffler, for example. Even the dean of the Spineless Caucus, Lindsey Graham, said, "Count me out," when it came to challenging the election and blindly supporting Trump. McCarthy, though, kept up Trump's big lie. He voted against certifying the counts in Arizona and Pennsylvania. But this week, we learned exactly what lengths McCarthy claimed to be willing to go to against Trump in the days after the insurrection. "I've had it with this guy," he told colleagues, saying Trump incited people to attack the Capitol. These revelations are in an upcoming book from two veteran New York Times reporters, Alex Burns and Jonathan Martin, that the Times previewed on Thursday. NBC News also obtained excerpts from the book. According to the Times, McCarthy inquired about how to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove Trump from office. And on January the 10th, 2021, as Democrats were talking about impeaching Trump for a second time, McCarthy told his leadership team that he was going to ask Trump to stand down. He said he'd tell Trump, "I think this impeachment will pass, and it would be my recommendation you should resign." McCarthy even referred to Twitter and Facebook suspensions of Trump's account, wondering if the same could be done for Republicans like Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, who had been one of the loudest election deniers. Yes, Kevin McCarthy, who publicly rails against big tech censorship, mused in private about taking away right-wing Twitter accounts. But soon, his public spinelessness would resurface. McCarthy was at Mar-a-Lago just 3 weeks after the insurrection, all smiles with the former president. The cynicism is appalling, but certainly not surprising. NBC News asked McCarthy's office if he said he would push President Trump to resign, and if he wanted tech companies to remove the accounts of Republican members of his caucus. A spokesman said both claims were false. He's denying it. But if you think McCarthy's bad, check out Mitch McConnell. Burns and Martin report that the then Senate Majority Leader was also outraged following January the 6th. He reportedly told two longtime advisors ahead of the House impeachment vote, "If this isn't impeachable, I don't know what is." And he said the Democrats are going to take care of the son of a bitch for us. For us. Now, McConnell's comments might be refreshing, they might sound relieving, if only we didn't remember what happened next. The House did vote to impeach the man McConnell called an SOB, and around that time, reports started emerging that McConnell himself might vote to convict in the Senate. But when it got to the Senate, McConnell backed away. He instead preferred to opt for a dodgy political argument that there was no way for the Senate to convict a president once he was out of office. Even though McConnell, as the most powerful person in the Senate in January, could have held a Senate trial while Trump was still in office. 7 Senate Republicans joined Democrats in voting to convict Trump. None of them were named Mitch McConnell. And a few weeks later, he was asked about Trump on Fox.
If the president was the party's nominee, would you support him?
The nominee of the party? Absolutely.
Mitch McConnell was all for Trump's conviction in the Senate. In private. He recognized the threat. In private. But then publicly he did nothing about it. In fact, he helped block it. He helped block the conviction and signaled to his party that it should still rally around Trump if he runs again. NBC News reached out to McConnell for comment on the Times' reporting, but as of now, we haven't heard back. I keep thinking I can never be surprised anymore by today's Republican Party. But Mitch McConnell's cynicism and spinelessness still shocks me, and should shock all of us. Then again, maybe it's to be expected, considering McConnell's plans for the midterm elections. There are exactly 200 days until the midterms, but who's counting? And it's no secret that Democrats look like they could be headed for huge losses. But it's not over, not yet, especially in the Senate. Don't take my word for it, take Mitch McConnell's. He said earlier this month that it could be bizarre Trump Republicans, he said, not Democrats, who may spoil the GOP Senate map.
How could you screw this up? It's actually possible. And we've had some experience with that in the past. You can't nominate somebody who's just sort of unacceptable to a broader group of people and win. And we had that experience in 2010 and 2012 by nominating people. None of you will remember any of these people because they're not in the Senate. Just kind of bizarre people that got through the primary who couldn't win in November. So we need to make sure that doesn't happen, and the primary season's about to start.
Is it any wonder, then, that this week the Senate Republican leader took his biggest step yet in trying to become Senate Majority Leader for a second time? His super PAC, the Senate Leadership Fund, announced this week that it will drop $141 million on ads in 7 states with competitive races. Republicans are especially focused on flipping blue seats in Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. But McConnell's super PAC is also playing defense, pumping money into competitive races in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, where Republican senators are retiring. And the PAC is also pouring more than $7 million into Alaska, where centrist Republican Lisa Murkowski faces a primary challenge from a Trump-endorsed election truther. So much depends on the Senate, the Biden agenda, Supreme Court nominations, the very future of this republic. And to get control of the Senate, McConnell needs to not only beat Democrats, but crazed authoritarian sycophants who take their marching orders from the man at Mar-a-Lago. Can McConnell do it, or can Democrats take advantage of the ongoing civil war inside the GOP? Joining me now to discuss this is veteran Democratic pollster Cornell Belcher. He's president of Brilliant Corners Research and an MSNBC political analyst. Cornell, thanks for coming back on the show. I want to go through some of the states where Democrats are playing defense in the Senate. First of all, there is, of course, Georgia, where McConnell's super PAC is spending the most, a whopping $37 million to knock off freshman Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock. Polls currently show Warnock neck and neck with former NFL player Herschel Walker, whose extremism we've profiled on this show before. Cornell, Warnock won that seat against Kelly Loeffler last year, running a populist and progressive campaign. Can he do that again? Should he do it again?
Well, I think he can do it again. But look, let's talk about the dynamics of midterms. Midterms are not like presidential races. And if you look at Georgia, you look at Arizona, you look at Nevada, these places that are being targeted. These are seats races where Biden, quite frankly, didn't run up very large margin, and our Senate candidates didn't run up very large margins. And I think if you look at a state like Georgia, I think it's roughly around 100,000 votes that separated Warnock from his opponent that time around. And the problem is, as you well know, is that it's certain voters pull back in midterms. And so when I look at a state like Georgia, which was instrumental in Democrats flipping the Senate, what powered that? Well, Democrats did better in the suburbs. We did a lot better with college-educated white voters, particularly college-educated white women in the suburbs than we had before. But we also got this tremendous surge among young voters, and particularly among young voters of color. And African-American vote in that state was so instrumental. But at the same time, if you look at what the measurements are right now today, who are the voters who are the most, the least energized? And the ones who, quite frankly, if you look at Biden's approval numbers, where he's lost the most ground. Look, Republicans didn't all of a sudden say, I don't like Biden now, I liked him before. No, he's lost the most ground, quite frankly, among younger voters. And he's lost a lot of ground among African-American voters. And those are voters that are going to be essential for a state like Georgia.
And, of course, also among Latino voters, people of color more broadly. And on that note, Cornell, there's Arizona. Let's have a look at Arizona, where former astronaut Mark Kelly, sitting senator, junior senator from Arizona, has tacked right on immigration to defend his seat. 9 Republicans are vying to run against him, and Donald Trump says he'll make an endorsement soon. McConnell's PAC is pumping $14 million into that race. What do you make of that?
Well, one is I want your viewers to think about the enormous amount of money, the absurd, almost obscene amount of money that is being pumped into politics by outside groups. And quite frankly, Americans, whether you're on the left or you're right, you should be bothered by that because all this money in politics is spoiling your politics and is taking your voice. Now, that said, to McConnell's early point is who's going to come out of the Republican primary and sort of the Trump endorsements. And you look at Georgia and you look at Arizona, and Mitch McConnell is spot on. His largest hurdle right now is if they can get out of the Republican primary, viable mainstream Republican candidates, or quite frankly, do you look like candidates that are problematic? Like, for example, Herschel Walker in Georgia. You've documented how some of the insane things that Herschel Walker has done and
Yes.
said. Is he going to a certain extent, is he going to be a viable candidate once voters start understanding and knowing who he is, and once Democrats turn their attack on him?
The state of Georgia also produced Marjorie Taylor Greene, so maybe they'll be fine with him. Let's talk, last but not least, Cornel, we have Nevada, where McConnell is dropping $15 million to defeat another freshman Democrat, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto. And 8 Republicans are battling for the nomination to run against her. Nevada's been interesting for multiple reasons, especially, again, that Latino vote. And there's great talk of Trump making inroads into Latino communities despite the racism he's pushed against Latinos.
Yeah, look, Nevada is a fascinating state. I mean, people might not remember this, but once upon a time, we flipped Nevada blue under Obama, but before then, Nevada was a fairly consistent red state. And it's been trending more blue, quite frankly, because of the growth in that Latino or Hispanic community and the voting power there. So when you talk about sort of the Latino vote sort of not being as energized and beginning to sort of pull back, that's really problematic for Democrats, not only out west, but also nationally. But one quick thing on the Latino vote, I think far too often we're talking about it as a monolith. And truth of the matter is,
yes,
we got to stop talking about it as a monolith because you know as well as I do that if you're talking about someone with Dominican origins versus someone with Puerto Rican origins versus someone with Cuban origins, they're dramatically different. And when you look at someone with Mexican origin, they're dramatically different from Cuban origins.
Yeah.
So we have seen a pullback of some of the Latino vote, but it's been among particular groups of Latino voters in particular.
It's going to be very close, and I'm sure we're going to have multiple conversations on this show about it. But for now, Cornel Belcher, thank you for your analysis. Appreciate it.